Hello, everyone. As many of you know, my name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer behind the YouTube channel Nonconformist Conscience and the website as well. So, on Monday, I wrote the written report. If you are someone who likes to read, that link is going to be posted in the description, so you can click on that if you would prefer to read that, or if you like to read after you watch this. So this week we have a few things happening. On the 23rd, Venus entered the sign of Capricorn. There she's ruled by Saturn in the sign of Pisces. So we now have 3 planets in the sign of Capricorn ruled by Saturn and Pisces. And to me, this is really indicative of this process that we're doing throughout this year, which is Pluto entered Aquarius. We are called to really objectify and to liberate and to rebel against crystallizations held within pertaining to our conditioning, or how I have some friends who call it programming. So that's about breaking down. Pluto in Aquarius is about really liberating from these structures of how we have structured our consciousness, which creates how we structure reality, right? That's why my reality can be very different from someone else's, because it stems from our conditioning, not even from this lifetime, but prior lifetimes. So now that Pluto is in Aquarius, we are really asked to have this objectivity to liberate from these dynamics that we have been working on since 2008, since Pluto went into the sign of Capricorn. On a collective level, we've seen in true Plutonian fashion the crumbling of social structures as a way to evolve Pluto, these social structures. So Pluto in Aquarius now, ruled by Uranus and Taurus, is really about this continued transformation of our relationship to self. Uranus is in Taurus, and it is ruled by this Venus in Capricorn. And like I said, not only is Venus in the sign of Capricorn, but Mercury and Mars are both there as well. All ruled by Saturn in Pisces, which was the other week Pluto's ruler. And now Pluto is ruled by Uranus, but it's pulling in the Capricorn archetype right now. So there's this dance of a need to personally self-reflect, Capricorn, in order to gain wisdom from the direct experience of how we've been initiated, how we have been, what we've been dealing with in life. And we are called to still self-reflect right now. And we're going to be called to self-reflect. We're always called to self-reflect, but it has been really emphasized. And so now we're bringing in more of this objectivity. Now that we've had some awareness come through self-reflection, we are asked to really liberate from these dynamics through our objective awareness and the reflecting process that we have been doing. So it's like this, even though Pluto is in Aquarius right now, there's still this leftover energy of the Capricornian dynamic. And, Pluto is going to go back into Capricorn later this year for the very last time before it enters back into Aquarius for the long haul until 2044. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about Venus in Capricorn right now. Not only is Venus ruling Uranus, but Venus is also ruling Jupiter in Taurus. So there's this really big emphasis on this Taurus Capricorn dynamic of Taurus really calls for us to ground within our relationship to self. It is about our relationship to self, our self-esteem, our self-preservation, our survival instincts, our own natural resources that we carry within ourselves. It is also, there's a trine that naturally occurs from Capricorn to the sign of Taurus. And it's part of the natural earth trine, but I'm really going to talk about the Capricorn Taurus dynamic, which is about, in the sign of Taurus, we really get to understand, and this is the inner side of Venus, right? So it's really pulling in the inner side of Venus right now, with Venus being like the ruler of Jupiter and Uranus. Also the South Node in Libra, but I'm going to get to that in just a second. But when we are doing the Taurus work, we are really coming to understand who we are and really grounding and strengthening our relationship to self. And in the sign of Capricorn, we take what we learn in Taurus about our values and our needs, and then we utilize this information to be integral and to make correct judgment and to ask and answer our own questions instead of projecting these onto others. Sometimes people who have a lot of Capricorn or Libra, they are these people who really want to just, I wish someone would tell me what to do. That's what I hear a lot. So really, whenever we are naturally expressing Capricorn, we're able to tap into this Taurian root, our root nature, our relationship to self, and then to reflect on our own values and our feelings, which is another Taurus dynamic, and understand what we value and what we need. And then from that wellspring, we get to make correct judgment. And that is pulling in that natural trine from Taurus to Capricorn. Venus ruling Uranus right now, and Uranus in the sign of Taurus, Venus in Capricorn, is really this time to liberate from any type of social, familial, or religious, cultural conditioning that is not in alignment with your own natural values, your own natural needs. It's about really objectifying these dynamics through Venus and Capricorn self-reflecting. And with Venus being ruled by Saturn in the sign of Pisces, we're really wanting to culminate these old dynamics of how we have inwardly related to ourselves, how we viewed ourselves as an authority, or whether we give our authority away to other people. Venus in Capricorn is really about looking at also where we've suppressed certain dynamics about ourselves because society or family or religion says that that isn't in alignment with our values. And so there can be relational issues that come up during this transit that help us get in touch with where we have felt oppressed by others or systems or structures, Capricorn, or where we have maybe been repressing something because maybe we feel alienated from society or our community. And for other people during this time, suppression is more of a willingness to shove things down, whereas repression is something that we've disconnected from, where we have been conditioned to not even access that. And so there can be this time period while Venus is transiting the sign of Capricorn and is the ruler of Uranus and Jupiter that really speaks to these repressions surfacing, so that way we can self-reflect, and then through Uranus and Taurus we can objectify the feelings and the emotions that are coming up that maybe we weren't able to get a grasp on or even know were there prior to. And with Jupiter and Taurus being ruled by Venus and Capricorn, there is this need to expand upon this information. That's also reflected with Mercury in the sign of Capricorn as well. But with Venus ruling Jupiter and Taurus, it's like, what do I need to expand upon that feels more authentic and in alignment with who I am and my own sense of authority? Or what feels integral to me where I can show up sincerely and authentically in life in an integral way? And this can be dealing with relationships with others as well, seeing as Venus is also the ruler of the South Node in Libra. And as I've been talking about since this transit of the nodes occurred, this is really highlighting prior dynamics, the South Node, of where imbalances have occurred within our relationships, or maybe where we, seeing as there's all of this Taurus energy, are needing to reconnect with our relationship to self. Maybe we've been abandoning ourselves as a way to feel secure in a relationship, which is actually a false sense of security. So a lot around correct judgment and self-reflection and objectification can be coming up right now for us to deal with these dynamics and to really gain the wisdom that our souls are wanting us to gain. This can have the propensity to allow us to be natural role models, to mirror this way of being in relationships, of being integral, ethical, aligning with one's own values, being one's own authority, being able to make correct judgment and be able to discern what choice it is one is needing to make at this time pertaining to their relationships. As always with Libra, relationships are not of a Platonian, are not of always a Platonian scorpionic eighth house feel. That's more of where we merge with another and merge our resources with another. That can also be merging our souls through sex. This, in the sign of Libra, the South Node in Libra, is really more about any type of one-on-one personal relationship. And it doesn't just have to be with a person, it can be with work. Our spiritual relationship is another one. So it's highlighting any type of one-on-one relationship you have with something and seeing if we're needing to learn how to balance and harmonize more with that. How do we feel more authentic? How do we feel like an equal in relationships? Is that something that's difficult for you right now? Are you giving your authority away? Venus and Capricorn. Are you projecting your expectations onto someone else and wanting someone to meet your needs? Or are you able to meet your own needs? Are you able to do the Taurus dynamic and live authentically, Jupiter Taurus, and to, in that authenticity, be able to be self-reliant? Are you able to meet your own emotional needs right now? How does that look for you? How are your relationships with others? How is your relationship with work? How is your spiritual relationship? Capricorn also wants us to really grasp self-determination. And with Venus and Capricorn, there's this influx of energy being reflected at us, that this is a time for us to be self-determined, to understand our relationship to self and to take responsibility for fostering that relationship to self and to be self-determined to do so. So with Venus being ruled by Saturn and the sign of Pisces throughout this transit, there's this culminating and dissolving process of really needing to also look at our emotional dynamics. Capricorn can feel like something is corked or pent up, or something's bubbling below the surface. And if you are feeling that way, Saturn and Pisces really reflects this is a time to swim into the ocean of our emotions, to really get in there and feel whatever it is that we need to feel, and then to self-reflect on that and to sit with it. And that helps with a culmination process. We can't really know ourselves unless we are willing to understand our own emotional dynamics. We don't evolve through intellectualizing things. We evolve through being able to understand our emotions. We evolve through the emotional body. And so with Venus and Capricorn ruled by Saturn and Pisces, this is really this call to get into the emotional body. And then seeing as Jupiter is also ruled by Venus, and so is Uranus, it's about really grounding within our feelings and accessing our emotions through our feelings. And I've talked about this a little bit in the past, because I think people often feel like feelings are synonymous with emotions, and they're actually two distinct things. So a feeling, and it's perfect for it to be a Taurus dynamic, where Taurus can also correlate with it's our relationship to ourselves. It's the feelings that emanate from our body that also goes into our actual structure of our body, which is that natural trine between Capricorn and Taurus. But feelings occur within the body. They can be sensations. Like, have you ever walked into a room and something feels really off, and it's not something you're intellectualizing at first, it's something you're feeling within your body. And then all of a sudden you can intellectualize it. Well, we're not supposed to just intellectualize it like, oh, someone has weird energy. We're really supposed to tap into, well, what is this sensation that I'm feeling in my body? And through Uranus and Taurus, to objectify this as a way to actually access the emotional dynamics. Like, what is this taking me back to? Especially if you've had trauma before, which I feel like most of us have, we can be triggered by external events that are creating a feeling sensation within our body. And that feeling sensation is actually pointing to a root, an emotional root within that we are supposed to be observing as a way to get to know ourselves even further, to understand what our emotions are. How can we emotionally validate ourselves in moments where we are being triggered, to understand and emotionally validate the things that are going on inside of our bodies. Like, maybe you're someone who has terrible social anxiety. This would be a time for you to reflect on and observe what comes up for you, and understanding if you can pinpoint it to some type of trauma that's occurred in the past that conditioned this dynamic within. For some people, they're not going to be able to pinpoint something, but they will be able to ground within their body more and to be able to understand themselves on a deeper level. Maybe this isn't a social setting that is really resonating with my frequency anymore. Maybe I need to reflect on what that means for me, and is this aligning with my values or my needs? There's a variety of ways that all of this can come up, but ultimately Venus in Capricorn is wanting us to have this deep emotional reflection, and that is also reflected in Saturn and Pisces, because there's some type of pre-existing dynamic within each one of us and on a collective level that is wanting to be dissolved and culminated so we can start a new cycle. So it's really interesting that on the 23rd, when Venus entered Capricorn, Saturn was in a first quarter trine to the moon in Cancer, which really just emphasizes what I've been talking about, needing to access the emotional dynamics and to take responsibility for one's own evolutionary growth and their relationship to self, Venus and Capricorn. That first quarter trine from Saturn to the moon, was it a first quarter? Let me make sure. Yes, it was. I wanted to be positive. That first quarter trine can really indicate sometimes that we've gotten too comfortable with some type of dynamic and that it's kind of come to a standstill, our growth in that particular capacity. And so Saturn in Pisces in a first quarter trine to the moon in Cancer is really saying, hey, along with this Venus in Capricorn, what are you needing to access here? And if you have the desire and the intention behind accessing this, there can really be an integration process that happens through that trine that gets us to understand how we've structured something within and how that has affected and conditioned our emotional reality. So I found that really interesting and how that just emphasizes this dynamic. The moon was also square the nodes later on in the day, with the resolution being the north node, and that's conjunct Chiron. So it's like, as we have this willingness to look at these emotional dynamics and to self-discover and understand what these are meaning, we then get to take this information and apply it as a way to move forward, to create forward momentum, to create action, north node. And this can have the propensity with Chiron there to change our awareness around some type of wound or trauma that we've experienced that's affected how we emotionally validate ourselves. As the moon was squaring the nodal axis, it was standing across the sky from Mars. So on the one hand, there's this need to throw off old dynamics and a need to integrate. And the integration is about being one's own authority. Mars squaring the nodes, and this is firing off a cardinal cross as Venus entered the sign of Capricorn. Mars standing across, squaring the nodal axis, its resolution node was the south node, and Libra ruled by this Venus. And so it's this need to self-reflect and act on the desires to self-discover. Where have imbalances been? How has that been? It's pulling in the opposition to the moon. How has this affected me on an emotional level? Have I projected things onto other people? Have things been projected onto me? How can I be my own authority? How can I emotionally mature? And emotional maturation comes through really being courageous to explore the emotional dynamics. And then through that, we get to apply that information to the north node that helps us to actualize this dynamic. So I found it fascinating that this was going on when Venus entered the sign of Capricorn. It's like Pluto is in Aquarius and it is wanting us to go and to liberate and to throw off all of this stuff. But in order to do that, we have to know what we're needing to throw off and liberate from. And so Venus entering Capricorn, and then this cardinal grand cross happening the same day between the nodal axis and Mars and the moon is really about this culmination process that's wanting to happen through diving into our emotional dynamics. So this week can be feeling like, okay, I've been going, in true cardinal fashion, I've initiated something here, and now I have to take a step back. I have to reflect. I have to look at the past a little bit in order to move forwards. And I need to look at, what's coming up and what are my triggers and what is this correlating with? What does this feel like? And what emotion is this connected with? And then I need to understand this so that this liberation process can continue to happen. And that is this energy. And then today, the 25th, right? We have a full moon. I have the Greenwich, England chart pulled up, and for those who are students of astrology, when you pull up a chart for an event, if you do it for Greenwich, England, that is a chart that speaks to the collective nature, and you are able to use the houses and the signs, especially if you're someone who's wanting to get into forecasting like I do. So I just wanted to let that be known. It's a great way to look at the collective energies. So I have this chart pulled up on the screen beside me. I'm not showing it. I feel like that kind of gets in the way of, it can be a lot of information for people. But today, this full moon is really being activated by Pluto. Before the full moon occurred, the moon first opposed Pluto, and technically Pluto and the sun are still conjunct, but this full moon is happening at 5 degrees Leo, so it is still in opposition to Pluto during the full moon, but it exacts in an opposition to Pluto a couple of hours before this full moon occurs. And so this is like, hey, if you've been reflecting on emotional dynamics, here's a burst of insight into a liberation process from pre-existing emotional dynamics. It kind of like just gives this an oomph. And then when this full moon occurs, it, like I said, it's happening at 5 degrees Leo and 14 minutes. So if you have something there, especially in the fixed signs, you're really going to feel this. I think for a lot of people who have any type of awareness or are awake are going to feel this full moon, particularly because Pluto is in Aquarius. It's energizing this full moon. Aquarius is about the collective conscious. And so it can be something that is really, really felt. So let's break this down. Full moons are whenever these dynamics have reached a whatever was started in the new phase. So the new moon 6 months ago, the Leo full moon 6 months ago, whatever was started back then and initiated on an emotional level, the emotional dynamics that you have been working on. So think back 6 months ago. I have it written down in the forecast when this was, I believe it was June. I could be wrong. Or July. There have been things that we have been working on regarding our self-love and self-dignity and self-respect and what we have been wanting to self-actualize. This full moon echoes this 6-month period of time because it's come into a full phase. It's now opposite the sun, its ruler in Aquarius. So this is also asking for us to throw something off that we've discovered and liberate from it. And then on the other hand, to have an integration process. This moon being ruled by the sun that it's opposing is really about what are we trying to self-actualize? What are we trying to throw off? Well, there is this understanding within the Leo Aquarius dynamic, these signs that we're really trying to liberate from social structures. in any type of conditioning. That would be the Aquarius part. But on the Leo side, it's about understanding that we're unique. And so what can be, true and resonate in the heart center for one person isn't going to necessarily do that for another. And so there's this beautiful understanding that within the sign of Leo that like, oh, I'm unique and I'm different. And guess what? You are too. And so there's a need for this integration of understanding that one is an equal. And that's really emphasized as well with the full phase, which is the full moon. There can be this feeling of still wanting to compare and contrast oneself to others. And so not being able to self-actualize and come out as an equal because we're still stuck in this realm of comparison. And this is further highlighted, not even by the full phase, but by this nodal axis that's going on. So this is a full moon that can really help us understand our emotional dynamics of whether or not we view others as equal, whether or not to ourselves, or whether or not we view ourselves as equal to others. Are we over comparing? Are we compensating? And then the call is to observe and to objectify these dynamics so we can self-actualize through this liberation process. And with the sun being ruled by Uranus and Taurus, pulling in that Venus in Capricorn, excuse me, my allergies are going crazy. We can liberate from the things in which make us feel less than, or maybe an overinflated sense of self. This is a time of the transformation of relationship to self. And but what better way to transform our relationship to ourself than to understand our unique nature. This is even further emphasized because Jupiter is squaring the moon and the sun. And so for some people, we can be looking at where we might be overcompensating stemming from comparing ourselves to others and really needing to lean into our heart center, really needing to understand that we can show up authentically and honestly and sincerely, and that can help us change our inner vibration and also help us to self-actualize further, to be able to meet our friends that we're meant to have community with. That's part of Jupiter square to the sun in Aquarius, and Jupiter's approaching Uranus. So it's really this call to really tap into our creative function of ourselves, what's unique, and to not compare, and to just live authentically, and to do it in a way that can help others. Like this Jupiter being ruled by Venus and Capricorn to me speaks to when we do this and we self-actualize through this dynamic, it actually helps the collective because it shows that it can be done. And so you can become a natural role model through this Capricorn dynamic being pulled into this full moon. This full moon really calls for us to liberate from anything that's making us feel less than. Anything that is making us feel like we have to overcompensate. And what I mean by that is a really great Leo way to put this is like, have you ever seen someone who has like kind of narcissistic tendencies or an overinflated sense of self? Below that exterior that they're presenting is an overcompensation, because really on the inside they feel inferior. So this can like happen in all different types of ways. You can also have someone who feels truly a sense of inflation that they're better, and then they present as they overcompensate because they know that about themselves. So then they will present as really humble whenever they're not. Their inner reality is not what they're presenting. And so this is a full moon that speaks to having your inner reality match your outer reality as a way to be integral, right? That's pulling in Venus and Capricorn. Jupiter squaring the sun in Aquarius while it's approaching Uranus is this call to look at, you know, and to observe whether or not we're doing this, whether or not we're being authentic, whether or not we are showing ourselves in our true authentic nature, coming as we are, giving ourselves permission to come as we are. If we do this, what it does through the Aquarian function is we project ourselves out. Projection is an Aquarius thing. And what that does is it calls in the people who really resonate with you. So if you are feeling this sense of not belonging, or that you haven't met your community yet, or that you feel a bit alienated, because with this full moon, there can be these feelings that come to a head to be exposed, for us to observe them, right? And get to the bottom of, why do I feel alienated? That's part of Jupiter squaring this full moon and the sun, is we can understand what this is about and what we can do to remedy this. And sometimes this means being a group of one if necessary for the time being. Sometimes it means blazing your own path, you know? And when you do that, it will call in the right people. There is a huge dynamic of making correct judgment during this time, how you present yourself to the world, how you project yourself out into the world. Are you doing it with self-love and self-dignity, Leo? Or are you overcompensating because you feel inferior, or you have, you just feel so alienated and different, you feel like you can't be yourself. So there's some of these dynamics going on. Venus is also in a last quarter sextile to Saturn, and its ruler during this full moon. And to me, the last quarter sextile, it speaks to, we know what we need to do, but we can feel like the draw is to go to the past, to do what we've always done out of comfort. And so Venus in a last quarter sextile to Saturn and Pisces is really about, in order to culminate long-standing dynamics, we have to shake the pattern up. We have to now, if we're understanding or coming to understand ourselves more deeply, there is a responsibility about showing that, putting it out there into the world, into society, as a way to really liberate from the past and to culminate long-standing dynamics of maybe where we've hid who we were, or we have been living a life that is more about how we've been taught and conditioned rather than living for ourselves and what we know to be true. This is highlighted with Uranus and Jupiter being ruled by this Venus and Capricorn that's in a last quarter sextile to Saturn and Pisces. This can also be about reflecting on our ideals within our relationships, and how those ideals that have been conditioned have, have it affected our sense of self and how we need to have this recovery and healing process and really self-reflect and internalize and get to the bottom of this. So what I mean by this is like, okay, I can give a personal example. I love giving these. I feel like it helps. I always feel like it helps with other people when they give me personal examples, but I talked about this the other year a lot, but there can be this dynamic of checking boxes. Like in my family growing up, I was really conditioned that it's very patriarchal. So like you go to high school and you graduate and then you go to college and you meet a partner and then you get married and then you have babies, and these are all boxes that you check and they become ideals, this thing that we're supposed to do, that this, if I do this, if I obtain this, I'm going to be happy. And here's the thing about Pisces, and I love Deva Green is the one who taught me this a long time ago, which Pisces can be like sand falling through our fingers or balloons or bubbles popping. Once you get something that you've really wanted, that has become an ideal, that you've given ultimate meaning to, kind of these Piscean things, it can really feel like once you grab it, it's sand falling through your fingers. And I know that I've experienced that in my life whenever I was checking conditioned boxes, the things that I was conditioned, the promises that were made to me that if you do this, X, Y, and Z, you follow this formula, you're going to be happy. This full moon says if you've been doing that, something has reached a limit and you are not being in your authentic nature and you aren't self-actualizing, because maybe how do we know ourselves if we're just following a specific formula? That's not knowing what our actual values are. That's not being creative and understanding how unique we are and how my values can be different from someone else's. This full moon, especially with Venus in a last quarter sextile to Saturn, says whatever you've been discovering about your values and your needs, this is a time to apply this to life as a way to culminate, as a way to self-actualize, as a way to show up authentically and sincerely. This isn't a time for checking boxes. This is a time for us to be self-discovering and drawing circles and X's and, coloring the pages of the coloring book instead of being perfunctory of how we've been taught. This full moon can give that flavor. So Venus is in a last quarter sextile to Saturn and Pisces, and then Saturn and Pisces is in a crescent sextile to Jupiter. So it's like if we're doing this Venus and Capricorn work and we're self-reflecting and we're looking at everything that's coming up revolving our emotional dynamics. Capricorn wants us to go to that polarity. To Cancer, this is also a full moon, really emphasizing this dynamic. Venus is also in conjunct this moon. So this is a full moon that is about, especially because that's a gibbous in conjunct between Venus and the moon. This is a full moon that's really about self-refinement and self-improvement. And how we do that is through understanding ourselves, from being grounded within our heart center, of making correct judgments through self-reflection of prior dynamics. And then that pulls in the last quarter sextile to Saturn from Venus that helps us to dissolve this. And then Saturn in a crescent phase sextile to Jupiter really helps us to be able to expand upon what we're giving meaning to in life, what we want to know about life, what we want to know about ourselves and our relationship to self. It's like it clears space. Once we clear out and throw off and liberate from what no longer is resonating, we can really have an expansion process that is geared in this transformation of self right now. And so there's this need to be self-determined to do so, to be self-determined to look at all of our ideals and how that they create imbalances and disharmony, and how most of the ideals that we're conditioned revolve around distortions. And they're about exclusivity instead of inclusion, right? So this is like this full moon that says, dare to be different, dare to be your authentic self, be self-determined to do so. This will close one door and open up a whole brand new world for you. This is like this prayer of this full moon. Mars is in a last quarter square to Chiron and the North Node during this. So a lot can be coming up around, our suppressed desires that are a result of that suppression is a result from wounds that have incurred long ago, where we felt like we couldn't self-actualize, where we felt like we couldn't act on what it was that we wanted to act on in order to self-discover. And this really has the propensity to, this moon speaks to such an expansion process to me, specifically, like looking at this for everyone on a collective level. This is on a collective level, it's about needing to learn how to harmonize like the government and society, the collective as a whole, and speaking to the trauma that's been created through beliefs, especially of a religious sense, through everything that I've already talked about. But if you want to know more about that, you can ask me questions. I'm not going to go too much into what this means on a collective level, but this is also Saturn in a crescent phase sextile to Jupiter. Speaking of beliefs, is about like, have some of your beliefs that you've been conditioned affected what you need and what you value? Have those beliefs created ideals? How's that affected your sense of self? How has that affected your sense of self-esteem? How has that affected the way that you feel like you're an authority of your own life? And there's this need to liberate from those and to objectify them. That way it clears out space for new meaning and new cosmological and philosophical understandings to come in that resonate with you. And that's a way to self-actualize as well. There's so much. Mercury is in a balsamic conjunction to Mars during this. It's also ruled by Saturn in Pisces, and this balsamic relationship between Mercury and Mars to me really speaks to this need to reflect on the information that we've received, the information that has been conditioned to us, onto us, and to look at, again, how this has affected us. Like, what we learn correlates with what we give meaning to, and what we give meaning to correlates with what we value, and what we value correlates to what we need. And so there's this big dynamic of needing to continue a liberation process from the old and a need to self-actualize through the individuating function. Aquarius, the sun being the ruler of this full moon. So it's like thinking for yourself. Have you stopped to think for yourself? What do I believe? What feels true to me? This helps us to individuate, and individuating helps us to evolve. Looking at how all of this has emotionally made us feel, like, how is this resonating in your body? What emotions is this corresponding to? I think for a lot of people, I can't tell you how many people have talked to me recently, and I feel like it's this archetype of this full moon of like, I don't feel like my parents were able to hear me when I was little or give me what I needed. My parents wanted me to be a specific person. That's kind of this Leo, Capricorn dynamic that can happen, where we feel like we're projected onto instead of listened to when we're younger. And so there can be wounds around this. My parents didn't see me for who I was unique. And so I was never validated. And so this is a time for emotional maturation to understand these dynamics about ourselves. Like that is a type of conditioning. And then to be our own mother and father and to self-actualize through that. Leo and Aquarius is really about the merging of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And it's also about a liberation of social constructs that you see this a lot with trans or non-binary people in their charts. They're wanting to liberate from gender constructs. So this can be coming up for some people too. Like, what am I feeling about being female? What am I feeling about being male? Does this, you know, does this resonate with me? Have I been falling into, if I'm female, have I been falling the conditioning roles of what a woman is supposed to be? If I'm a male, have I been following into the conditioning roles of what a male is supposed to be? These dynamics can be coming up as a way for us to reflect, objectify, and liberate from them. Because eventually what this gets us to is our most natural state of this is who I am authentically. This is how I feel I can show up in the world as my authentic self. It has nothing to do with the definition and the structures that society wants to put me in because they say that I'm this way. All of this can be coming up on personal and collective levels right now. And it's about throwing off, again, going back to Mercury in a balsamic conjunction to Mars, really wrapping up this phase of taking in knowledge that is of a different structured way that's affected our reality to where maybe we felt like we had to not act on the desires that we wanted. On the 26th, the next day, this Mercury enters a new phase with Mars. I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but Saturn is in a gibbous in conjunct to the moon as well. So essentially, there's a yod during this full moon between the moon, Saturn, and Venus. So the ruler of Venus is sextile Saturn, and Venus and Saturn are both in conjunct this moon. So on the one hand, this is about like self-improvement and self-refinement of our inner relationship to self. And on the other hand, this is about entering into society as an equal and showing up in a way that's relevant, that helps and benefits the whole, right? And that is the full phase in conjunct between Saturn and nope, that's a gibbous phase as well, sorry. They're both in gibbous phases. So the gibbous phase is really a Virgo feel. Like we are purging and purifying these ways that we have structured reality. And through that process, we are getting to liberate from these dynamics as a way to self-actualize right now. But we have to get into our emotions. That's this yod. Uranus is trine Mars and Mercury in a disseminating trine. So it's like whatever we're reflecting on and objectifying, we can really have a full understanding of what needs to be liberated from pertaining to everything I've been talking about, our conditioning, how we're feeling, how we're showing up in the world, all of this. So I feel like this full moon is a hell of a way to kick off the new year. It's the first full moon of the new year. It is it's really about like who do you want to be in the world? How do you want to show up? How do you self-actualize through that? How do you access your emotions? Then the next day on the 26th, Mercury and Mars conjunct exact at 16 degrees Capricorn, Saturn ruled. I've gone into this. This is more, it's Mercury is going to enter into a new phase with Mars. So it's like now we get to act on our desires. This is like speaking to, hey, act on these desires that you're having. And as you do that, it creates this initiation process to give us more Mercury information about ourselves. So we can have more self-reflection to go deeper into knowing who we are. And that still is in a disseminating trine to Uranus, who is stationing direct on this day. And so this is like, what new information have you found out about yourself? What do you need to liberate from? What desires are you wanting to act on that maybe you've suppressed? That way you can understand more information about yourself that helps to continue this process of transforming your relationship to self. Uranus being retrograde has been a review of revisiting in order to resolve. As Uranus stations, if you are consciously doing this work and you have something that comes up to you, or you have this same repeating thought, this message that's coming to you, this is where you can resolve some type of dynamic by acting on that. It can become very clear to you. And then the key is to act on the desire to do so, to make a change, to do something new, you know, as a way to create like new neural pathways is the way I see it, to understand things on a deeper level, to recondition the mind in a way that is more conducive for your evolutionary growth. That's through like stemming from throwing off like the old way of thinking, of intellectualizing, of feeling, of understanding oneself, of emoting. And I found it interesting because like Saturn rules Mercury, Mars, of course. So this also helps this like culmination process. But Saturn's ruler, Neptune, is in a last quarter square to Ceres and Sag. And so there's like this major call to Ceres is about returning to our nature. It's like the mother archetype that helps nurture and foster this image shamanist within all of us, male, female, it doesn't matter. That like speaks to how we return to our nature, this recovering something that we felt like we lost. And with Ceres and Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter and Taurus, this is like a recovery of our nature, of relating to ourselves in a natural way. And Neptune square and a last quarter square is also about anyone who has a last quarter square in their chart, I do, is going to understand that this is going to manifest one or two ways. This is going to want to hold on to the past to dear life because it's like, oh, it's comfortable, or this is utter rebellion. And to me, Pluto in Aquarius, the sun in Aquarius, this is on the heels of this full moon that has all of this Aquarian. A last quarter square can be about absolutely throwing off old dynamics. And so Neptune squaring Ceres to me speaks to throwing off any old dynamics that have created a sense of disillusionment or deception in your life stemming from beliefs that are not natural, that are rooted in man-made law and not natural law. And then through doing this, the rebellion of this information that we're coming to understand, we get to recover our authentic nature further and expand upon that. And that is Ceres in Sag, ruled by Jupiter and Taurus. So it's really interesting because Jupiter is also square the sun during this. So again, this is like self-actualizing through a liberation process of man-made beliefs, man-made law, man-made structures, constructs, ideals, and really getting to know oneself on a deeper level. And that looks completely different For all different people, that's like the unique nature about Leo, is it's about our unique intrinsic nature that is different. So this week is really interesting as Uranus stations. Again, it's Venus ruled. We've talked about that. But as Uranus stations, it's going to square this Leo moon before the moon moves into the sign of Virgo. So it's like, this is a call to act like, hey, whatever you are coming to understand in the light of the fullness of this moon the day before, all of this self-reflection, all of this diving into the emotional body, all of this getting in touch with your feelings and grounding within yourself. This is like the call to act on projecting ourselves out there in our own unique way and to do it authentically. So if there's anything that feels inauthentic during this week, there is a need to be self-determined and responsible to show up authentically. And that can change over time. Our authenticity changes over time. As we evolve, we become different people. But whoever you're coming to understand yourself right now, this is the time. It's go time. We project this out into the world, because guess what? Our vibration is changing and is shifting, and we will call in who we are meant to be around. And that is also the prayer for all of the individuals who feel really isolated and alienated right now. This is like the full moon for you. So this is your week. I will see you all next week. Again, I did the written forecast. You can go take a look at that if you want to understand your chart more. Book a session with me. If you cannot afford the price that I have on my website, do not worry. Contact me, email me, let me know what you can't afford. I will work with you. I have no problem doing that. I have said that before on here, and I will always say it when I remember to. But I don't do this for money. I do this because like I get a lot out of it, and also it helps me, and I just love this. I feel like I have a sense of purpose in life, and inflation is crazy. Like if I can help someone out, I'm going to. So if you really feel called to have a session, but you can't afford what is listed, let me know what you can, and I will work with you. I have no problem doing that. Anyway, I will see you all next week, and have a beautiful full moon. And this is a time for self-creation. We're like all in a state of becoming and reconnecting, and I feel like it's really beautiful. So I will talk to you all next week.